Ladies and gentlemen, take a moment, just 1 second, and look at the world around us. A world that, only a few years ago, we believed was moving within a stable order. A world where many thought that large-scale wars were a thing of the past. But now, what is unfolding before our eyes is no longer just ordinary news. It is a sign of a global shift in power. A ceasefire. 2 weeks. Just 14 days. It sounds short, almost insignificant. But in geopolitics, 14 days can be enough to change the fate of an entire region. 14 days can be the silence before a storm. And the question the whole world is asking is this real peace, or just a step back before a much bigger move forward? The United States and Iran, 2 names that need no introduction, 2 nations that have been in confrontation for decades. This is not just political disagreement. This is not just military tension. This is a struggle for power, influence, and global position. Throughout modern history, every time these 2 names appear together in headlines, the world holds its breath, because the consequences never stay confined to the Middle East. They spread globally. Oil prices rise, financial markets shake, nations begin preparing for worst-case scenarios. And this time is no different. But there is one key difference. This time, everything is happening faster, more decisively, and more unpredictably than ever before. A ceasefire is announced, not after months of negotiations, not after long, exhausting conferences, but almost suddenly. For many, it brings a sense of relief. But for those who understand geopolitics, it raises more questions than answers, because they know one thing. When powerful nations suddenly pause, it is often when they are preparing for something bigger. Imagine this: 2 fighters in the middle of a match, both throwing powerful punches. The crowd holds its breath. And then suddenly, they step back. They stop fighting. They just look at each other. Is that the end of the fight, or the moment before the decisive strike? That is exactly the situation the world is facing right now. A moment of silence, but a dangerous silence. Because within that silence, strategies are being drawn, scenarios are being calculated, and decisions that could change history are being formed. And today, we are not just going to look at the surface of events. We are going deeper. Who truly benefits? Who is really controlling the game? And what could happen after these 14 days? Get ready, because what you are about to hear may change the way you see the world completely.
Part 1. The Return of a Hardline Strategy. In international politics, there is a truth that not everyone realizes. Not all leaders are playing the same game. Some believe in soft diplomacy. They talk, they negotiate, they avoid conflict at all costs. But there are also those who believe in a completely different philosophy. Pressure creates results. Power creates position. And unpredictability creates advantage. When a nation shifts from a soft strategy to a hardline approach, the entire international system begins to change. Allies must adjust, opponents must recalculate, and neutral nations begin to feel uneasy. Because in such an environment, one wrong move can come at a very high cost. Look at the Middle East, a region that for decades has never truly been stable. In this region, power does not come only from military strength. It also comes from geography, from natural resources, and from control over strategic choke points. And one of the most critical choke points in the world is the Strait of Hormuz. A narrow strip of water, yet it carries nearly 1/5 of the world's oil supply. Now imagine this. If that route is disrupted, the global economy would immediately feel the shock. Oil prices surge, shipping costs rise, inflation accelerates, and it's not just one country that is affected. The entire world feels the impact. Why this region matters globally? That is why any tension connected to this area is never just regional, it is global. And that is also why, when signs of escalation appear, markets react instantly. No need to wait for war to break out, no need for official confirmation. Just the possibility alone is enough to trigger waves of panic. It's not just about tension, it's about response. But what truly matters is not just the tension itself, it's how different sides respond to it. One side may choose to step back, another may choose confrontation, another may choose to wait, and those choices are what ultimately shape the outcome. A faster, riskier world. In the current situation, one thing is becoming very clear. Decisions are being made faster, reactions are becoming stronger, and the level of risk is rising. This creates an extremely sensitive environment, where even a small mistake can lead to massive consequences. When a ceasefire appears, in such a context, it is not a full stop. It is a comma, a pause, a moment to adjust, a window of time for all sides to ask, where do we really want this to go? Ending, building suspense. And this is only the beginning, because in the next part, we will dive deep into this 2-week pause. What is it really? A step towards peace, or a carefully calculated strategic trap?
Two, when tensions escalate, the world begins to shake. Imagine a morning. You wake up, open your phone, and see the headline. Tensions in the Middle East are escalating. Sounds familiar, right? But this time, things are different. Not a war of words, not just a few diplomatic statements back and forth, but clearer signals, faster, and more dangerous. In geopolitics, there is a very alarming rule. Major crises rarely begin with a big explosion. They begin with small signs, but repeated. A warship moves. A shipping route is threatened. A statement becomes more aggressive than usual. At first, no one pays much attention. But then, those signs begin to multiply, faster, and impossible to ignore. And that's when the world starts to realize something is not right. Global chain reaction. When tension appears in a strategic point like the Middle East, it never stays there. It spreads, fast, powerful, and hard to control. Look at the first reaction, financial markets. No need for war to break out. Just the risk alone, investors begin to pull out. Indexes fluctuate sharply. Instability spreads. And then, oil prices. In a short time, oil prices can surge. Not because of immediate shortage, but because of fear. The fear that supply will be disrupted, transport routes will be blocked, costs will rise uncontrollably. And in the modern world, oil is not just energy, it is the backbone of the economy. When oil prices rise, transportation costs increase, goods become more expensive, inflation rises. And when inflation rises, every nation is affected. No longer just about the US or Iran. This is something many people overlook. They think, this is just about the US and Iran. But in reality, it's not. Europe depends heavily on imported energy. When oil prices rise, they feel it first. Cost of living increases. Economic pressure rises. Risk of recession appears. China. Major Asian economies rely heavily on energy from the Middle East. Even a small disruption can shake the entire production system. Global trade. Remember, the world today is more connected than ever. A problem in one place can become everyone's problem. And that's the most dangerous moment. Not when war breaks out, but before it happens. When everything is still unclear. When each side is watching. When every decision is experimental. That is the stage where mistakes are most likely, and consequences can be the greatest. Target. The game of perception. In times of tension, it's not just military actions that matter. It's how each side perceives the other's actions. A defensive move can be seen as preparation for attack. A warning signal can be seen as provocation. And when perception is distorted, escalation can happen very quickly. Brain. Pressure on leaders. In moments like this, leaders are not only facing external opponents, they are also under internal pressure. Pressure from the public. Pressure from politics. Pressure from the economy. They must make decisions, fast, accurate, and without mistakes.
But in an unstable environment, that is almost impossible to guarantee. And then, a ceasefire appears. After all that tension, an unexpected announcement appears. A ceasefire. Not permanent, not long-term, just 2 weeks. A very short period, but enough to calm the markets, reduce pressure, create a sense that things are stabilizing. But pause for a moment and think deeper. Is this really a solution? Or is it a strategic step back, a way to buy time, an opportunity to prepare for the next move? Because in history, many major conflicts have had such pauses. And sometimes, those pauses become the stepping stone for even greater tension. So let's look at the full picture again. Tensions escalating, markets shaking, the world concerned, and then a ceasefire appears. It may seem like things are cooling down, but in reality, it may just be the calm before the real storm begins. And the biggest question now is, what will these 2 weeks lead to? A path toward peace? Or a stepping stone toward a much bigger confrontation?
Three. The 2-week pause, a masterstroke or a strategic trap. Take a moment and think carefully about this. If you were in the middle of an intense confrontation, if everything was escalating, if the entire world was holding its breath watching, would you pause? The answer is usually no. Because in normal logic, when you have the advantage, you keep pressing. When you are under pressure, you fight back. But here, both sides agreed to pause. And that is the most unusual part. A ceasefire is never simple. In the history of geopolitics, no ceasefire is ever neutral. Every ceasefire serves a specific purpose, carries a calculation behind it. And the key point is, that purpose is often not on the negotiation table, but embedded in long-term strategy. Targeting 2 weeks. Why 2 weeks? Not 1 month, not 6 months, just 14 days. A period that is short enough not to be seen as a concession, long enough to carry out critical preparations. This is not a random number. It is a strategic window, searching hidden scenarios behind the ceasefire. Let's examine each possibility. Blue Scenario 1. Consolidating position. During these 2 weeks, both sides may reposition forces, check defense systems, assess damage. Things that cannot be done effectively under high tension. Yellow Scenario 2. Silent negotiations. Not all negotiations happen in front of cameras. Many of the most important ones take place in the shadows. Not announced, not declared, not leaked. These 2 weeks could be the time for back-channel diplomacy to operate. Red Scenario 3. Preparing for a new escalation. This is the most dangerous possibility. A ceasefire may be used to reduce international pressure, calm the markets, create a sense of stability. But in reality, it may be preparing for a stronger move. Dang. War is not just about weapons. We often think of war as missiles, tanks, explosions. But in the modern world, war is also psychological. A ceasefire can lower the opponent's guard, create a false sense of safety, cause both sides to reduce defenses. And that is when unexpected moves can happen. Bang. The highest level of psychological game. Imagine a chess match. 2 equally skilled players. They don't just look at the current move. They think 5 to 10 steps ahead. A ceasefire is a move, not to end the game, but to reshape the board, scaling who has the advantage. The most important question: who truly benefits from these 2 weeks? The answer is not simple. U.S. perspective. A pause can reduce immediate pressure,
Stabilize the domestic situation. Create room for next moves. Iran perspective. 2 weeks may provide time to breathe, reduced economic pressure, internal consolidation. Global perspective. What does the world see? A temporary de-escalation, but at the same time, prolonged uncertainty. Waiting, the biggest risk. The illusion of stability. When a ceasefire happens, people tend to think, everything is fine now. But in reality, this may be the most dangerous phase. Because vigilance decreases, pressure decreases, attention decreases. And during that time, the biggest decisions are often made. Fire. 2 weeks. Shorter than you think. 14 days may sound long. But in geopolitics, it is a very short period. Just enough to adjust, prepare, calculate, but not enough to resolve a deep conflict. Which means, this is not a solution. It is just a step in the process. So what are we really seeing? Not peace. Not an ending. But a strategic pause. A pause where all sides are preparing. All sides are calculating. And no one is truly stepping back. And this is the most important point. These 2 weeks do not determine the outcome. They only determine the next move. And that next move could take the world in 2 completely different directions. A path toward stability, or a path toward greater conflict.
Four, the real interests, who is winning, and what comes next. After everything. Take a moment once again. Take a deep breath, and look at the entire picture. What do we have? Escalating tensions, a world in turmoil, a sudden ceasefire, and 2 weeks of calculated silence. It may seem like a familiar sequence of events, but if we look deeper, this is not a random chain of events. This is a game where every move has a purpose, is calculated, and aims at a larger objective. The real interests are not on the surface. The first thing to understand, what we see in the news, is only the tip of the iceberg. And what lies beneath, that is what truly determines the game. The U.S. perspective. A short-term ceasefire may appear to be a cooling down. But if we analyze deeper, it brings significant strategic benefits. Domestic stability. When tensions decrease, markets become more stable, energy prices fluctuate less, public sentiment is reassured. This is extremely important because external power always begins with internal stability. Controlling the pace of conflict. One of the most critical elements in strategy is not how hard to strike, but when to strike. A ceasefire allows slowing down the pace, reassessing the situation, choosing a better timing, maintaining position. A short pause does not weaken a position if it is properly controlled. On the contrary, it can reinforce the image of being in control. Iran's perspective. On the other side, these 2 weeks also bring certain advantages. Time to breathe. In a high-pressure environment, a short pause can reduce economic pressure, stabilize internally, avoid larger shocks. Reorganization. A pause allows reassessing strategy, adjusting plans, preparing for the next steps. But the key point is, both sides benefit. And when both sides benefit, it is not the end. It is a transition phase. The world, observer or participant,
Most of us view this event as observers. But in reality, the whole world is involved. Global economy. A ceasefire helps reduce market pressure, stabilize oil prices, create a temporary sense of safety. But uncertainty still remains. Balance of power. Every event like this affects the balance of power. Other nations observe, adjust, and prepare. 3 future scenarios. What happens after 2 weeks? This is the most important part, because the future does not have only one path. Scenario 1. Genuine de-escalation. The ceasefire is extended. Negotiations progress. Tensions gradually ease. This is the most positive scenario, but also the least likely, because deep conflicts cannot be resolved quickly. Scenario 2. Return to tension. Negotiations fail to produce clear results. Both sides return to previous positions. Tension continues to simmer. This is the most common scenario in history. Scenario 3. Strong escalation. The ceasefire ends. An unexpected event occurs. Conflict intensifies. This is the most dangerous scenario. And what is concerning is, it is entirely possible. The uncomfortable truth. We want to believe that the world is moving towards peace. But in reality, the world is becoming more complex, more dangerous, and more unpredictable. So where does all of this lead? A simple question, but not an easy one. Are these 2 weeks an ending? Or a beginning? A door is opening. But what lies behind it? Peace? Or a greater storm? If you've made it this far, you are no longer an ordinary viewer. You are someone trying to understand the world. And in today's world, that is a powerful advantage. Remember, don't just read the news. Understand what lies behind the news. If this video helped you see things more clearly, hit follow, share it, and leave your thoughts. In your opinion, after these 2 weeks, where will the world go? Peace? Or a step toward greater conflict? Leave your comment below. I will read all of them. And we will continue to follow, analyze together, and better understand this world together.